with me. I missed you guys. So today's video is about how depression did not make me stronger. It definitely made me a lot weaker. This is gonna be so intense. It's gonna be a lot of details about the trauma I've experienced with being bipolar and having my episodes, which started coming out when I was 18 years old. I've experienced so much suffering in bipolar, and I'm going to talk a lot about my story living with my mental illness and how my big depression episode from 6 years ago still affects me today. I'm making this video to help everyone learn how to better love people going through mental illness and other traumas in life. It causes pain and isolation when people are told this will make you stronger, good will come out of suffering. It's honestly just like invalidating, and it makes us feel so alone. I'm reading from my video script, by the way. If it looks like I'm not directly looking at you guys, that is why. I love planning out these and being really intentional with everything that I say. Also making this because I know tons of you have mental illness, so just to pour love and hope into anyone who's been through trauma that has made them feel so broken and weakened, and that still affects them years and years later. You are definitely not alone. So there is this huge narrative in society where, as people are struggling through traumatic experiences, people always say, this will make you stronger. Keep holding on. You can make it through this. You can live through another night. In the end, it will make you better. In the end, you will be stronger. You'll be more empathetic. You'll have more life wisdom. So much good will come out of this. People literally say this to their friends, their family members, and it's actually with good intentions. It's an attempt to be encouraging. It's also, I noticed, like in a lot of songs, a lot of music, Christian and secular, but in a ton of like evangelical Christian songs. I see posts also about this on social media, trying to encourage people, trying to like be inspiring. This ideology is just huge in evangelical Protestant culture. I remember hearing this constantly when my mental illness was coming out back when I was Protestant, and it honestly helped me leave Protestantism because I just saw that this theology was so toxic and it caused extreme damage to me spiritually that I'm still scared to be vulnerable with God because of just like this theology of suffering. And this is controversial to say, but if I had been Catholic when my bipolar episodes came out, I would have gone through a lot less spiritual pain in the way I understood my relationship with God. So the concept of depression or any other traumatic experience making you stronger, I disagree with this concept completely. I had the exact opposite experience in depression and all my bipolar diagnosis, the aftermath of processing my diagnosis and going on medicine, just all of it together. It made me a lot weaker, and I have so many examples of it. I would say that I was extremely strong before going through my big depression episode, and that honestly got me through it. I know I've talked a lot about wanting to end my life, that kind of ideation, which I never ever had a plan for, but I feel like a lot of people go through with that because they don't have like a really strong community in their life. And because of that, and just because of the way I understood medication and like the hope that can come from it and everything, I feel like that honestly kept me safe. But day to day, what really kept me going and not feeling like super insecure about myself or like talking down to myself was because I knew my worth in God so strongly. And I think a lot of people, if you're like failing your classes, you can't get out of bed, you can't feed yourself, you can't text your friends back, I never would label myself or anyone with mental illness with this. But I think that a lot of people, they think I'm a failure. Like they feel like a failure because they're failing classes, they're not connecting with friends, they're not doing anything, they're a failure. And I honestly never, ever had low self-esteem my entire time in depression when I was like failing at my life from the outside because of how strong I was. But definitely super weakened after my full diagnosis came out. So what was very interesting about my experience in depression is that I looked so happy on the outside. And I was able to fake my personality for so long, which I think means I was really strong. But the main thing with my strength, like I was saying, is just not having negative self-talk. So I was recently talking to one of my best friends in October. I hadn't seen him in a few years. And he told me that the whole American concept of strength is wrong and not really Christianity, and how depression actually made him more humble, and that is a better virtue than this macho type strength. And I actually agree that depression did make me more humble. That helped me convert into Catholicism. So maybe that's like the biggest wisdom in this whole video. Okay, so synopsis. I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder in 2016 during my senior year of college, if you're new to my channel. Before the diagnosis, I had been living in a severe depression episode for 1 year. In 2015, about 3 months into my depression episode, I was diagnosed with major depressive disorder, MDD. So that was a false diagnosis. And then the year later, they're like, no, you're bipolar. You just had a bipolar episode of depression. And then they were kind of like, you have bipolar 2. And then a year later, I was told by a psychiatrist, you definitely have bipolar 1. It was very interesting at the time. I thought it was very sketchy because I was like, how do you know? Obviously, I talked about my life. She asked questions, but then she was like, you're bipolar 1. Like, I can feel it. You're in a manic episode right now. You're bipolar 1. And I was so offended at the time, but looking back, I'm like, oh, like I can see when people have manic episodes as well, who I meet in public and stuff. You can just like feel it and know it if you have enough experience with bipolar. So talking to therapists and psychiatrists, like in 2016, 2017, after my big bipolar diagnosis, we just discovered that basically like I'd been going through like depressive and hypomanic episodes like all throughout college, back and forth, but we just like didn't realize it at the time. Okay, so here's a list of how depression made me weaker. Number 1, less social. And this is like 6 years after my depression. So this is the one I hate the most, just because I've always been such an outgoing person, a people person, and I'm just not as good with people anymore. Depression broke my personality, and I'm not as extroverted as I was. I used to be so excited to meet new people, so confident, animatedly talking, asking them questions, making people feel understood, making jokes, just being a really fun person, and I completely lost that girl. When I'm around friends who I had pre-depression, it totally brings back my old personality. It's almost like a muscle memory type thing going on, but around new people who I've met since then, I'm like super shy. Less courageous, less extroverted, less outgoing, less making people feel loved and understood, less empathetic, less good at emotional support. And yeah, that whole socializing, interacting with people thing, I totally lost. And I'm going to talk about this more in a few minutes. But depression, you kind of have to like relearn how to be yourself and almost do like a mental type physical therapy, mental therapy, because you literally like lose life skills and parts of yourself after going through the trauma of an episode that long with like brain damage and everything. And certain parts of my personality, I never like intentionally relearned. And so that's why all this is going on. Okay. Number 2, Loss of ambition. That was a word people always used to describe me as so ambitious. Now I give up easily on so many things. When it comes to career goals, making money, life stages, planning for the future, I just do not have a drive or passion or this exciting vision or getting stoked about the future, planning things. I kind of just let things happen and give up easily on so many different day-to-day things. It's just like constant. Number 3, this might be the saddest one. I lost the emotional skills I learned in college. Emotional intelligence things just gone, forgotten because of the brain damage and memory loss from depression. Naturally, I'm horrible at emotional support. I'm bad at showing empathy, even though I feel it deeply. I'm bad at validating emotions. I had to learn all of these skills, and I think being a Christian growing up, I was Protestant my whole life, definitely helped my personality, but it was really in college when I learned a lot about psychology. I was mentored by a lot of people. I went through hard times. People did really good emotional support for me. I learned it from them and then gave emotional support to other people. So in college, I intentionally gained all of these emotional skills. So my personality is just very much like a rock, very logical, very matter of fact, very productivity. And so being good with emotions and good with people beyond just a superficial fun way, but being able to love people when they're going through hard times is just a skill that I lost because of my big depression episode and bipolar diagnosis. So before college, I had no clue what to do if someone was crying or broken or needed help. I did not know what to do. I learned in college. Now when someone's hurting, I'm totally clueless. So need to relearn that. Okay. Number 4, which I guess is the saddest one, is that I am still not healed after 6 years. I would say I've come a long way since 2016. After my bipolar diagnosis, I was still on 3 different medications, and for 4 months we were constantly adding medications, taking medication away, just trying to find the right balance. And honestly, it can take up to a year once you're diagnosed to find the medications that work the best for you. So that's just the thing that everyone goes through. But it wasn't until May of 2016 when I fully got out of depression permanently. And after that, I finally cried and processed my depression. Before that, I was just staying afloat, autopilot, all these things. And I never cried. And I think in depression, I couldn't cry. I was just ice emotionally. I didn't feel anything. So in May 2016, I finally started crying, processing my depression. I went to therapy to help process it. I did journaling. I started praying again. I just read my Bible constantly. And so every night for a year, I'm not exaggerating, I cried myself to sleep. And also just the passing of time really helps with anything you're hurting from. But I specifically cried every single night. I prayed a lot about it. I forced myself to feel those emotions because I knew that if I didn't feel those emotions, I would just be numb for the rest of my life. You have to let yourself feel pain. And I knew that. And I did that in 2016, 2017. And I remember times in 2017, I was in a car with my best friend. I don't know where we were going, but I remember we were on the freeway. And I remember telling her for the first time in 2 years, I feel whole again. And I haven't felt that for so long. But healing comes in waves. You can feel okay about something for 3 months, for a year, for 2 years, for 5 years. And then something can trigger it and you're right back in that broken place of where you were with whatever trauma you were experiencing. So many things can trigger those memories. A person, a song, a journal entry you're reading, anything. So many things, unexpected things can trigger an emotion. And sometimes if I intentionally think about that time, like when I watch one of my old YouTube videos or I'm reminiscing with a friend and they share a memory, I will just start crying, like sobbing uncontrollably when I'm triggered by something, and I will just be back in that horrible place in 2015 and 2016. And it's just like, it makes you feel so weak that like 7 years later, like I have not experienced depression at all. It's like I'm back to that broken girl. And I think it's just so hard because you feel like you've made so much emotional process, but it's like you're back to where you were and it feels like you haven't done any healing at all. And crying like that, when people say like that will make you stronger, I think like breaking down is not strong at all. That's falling apart. And maybe you could define it as strong, but like when people say like that will make you stronger, that will make you stronger, they're not thinking about like this uncontrollable sobbing broken feeling. That's not what people mean when they say it will make you stronger. So an example of this is I was thinking about applying to grad school a few years ago for psychology to become a licensed therapist, or grad school for like theology to like really aid my YouTube channel and stuff. And this was like in 2018, 2019. So it'd been a long time. I'd been on meds for a long time. I hadn't been in depression in years. And I was researching different schools. I was writing like, it's not called a cover letter. I forget what it's called. But I was writing the part of the application. And I was with my fiance at the time, Trevor. And I just started like sobbing, like crying uncontrollably. And like Trevor's like, what's wrong? What's going on? Because we were just like writing and editing and stuff. And like I couldn't even talk. Like I don't know what the word is when like you're not hyperventilating, but like you cannot talk because you can hardly breathe. Like that just like uncontrollable sobbing, crying emotion that I got because I was thinking back to how depression was just like destroying my brain, destroying my intellectualism, just being stuck in like academia when my brain was just like so absolutely broken. And I need a pillow. I'm getting uncomfortable sitting on the floor. So yeah, just the fact that like 3-4 years after I've experienced depression, I'm like reminded of what it was like being at a university and being in this space of like flourishing academia. Just like being reminded of that years later is just like crying uncontrollably, which is like definitely not the way people are describing it as strength. Okay, so number 5 is very interesting. So people are always like, going through pain makes you more compassionate and more gentle. So like I said, how I was already really strong, I was already extremely empathetic before all this happened, just because that's part of bipolar disorder. Like there's certain parts of bipolar where like before the episodes even come out, it's just like kind of part of your personality. So I was already extremely empathetic, especially when I was in a hypomanic episode or a manic episode, I would just feel everything so deeply. So depression for me was the exact opposite. It was just like numbness emotionally. The only way I could feel if I was like with a friend and like they were happy or excited, I could like kind of feel their emotion vicariously a little bit. So maybe all of this is caused by meds that just like once I was medicated for bipolar, since I've been diagnosed, the medicines like protect you from going manic, protect you from being hypomanic. And so I think the meds honestly like get rid of a lot of you emotionally for anyone who's bipolar. So I just like don't cry as much anymore. I don't feel as much anymore. When someone is hurting from something, I'm not gonna be like, my go-to is not to be like sitting next to them and being like, what's wrong? Why are you feeling this way? What can I do to help? You know, like I'm just not that like empathetic person at all. And I also don't feel so deeply towards other people's suffering or global injustices like I used to. Like, of course, I still care. I donate my money and stuff. So I think actions honestly matter more than emotions. But I don't feel like in that intense emergency way that I did. And sometimes I think it's a good thing. Like, I am going to make a whole live stream on bipolar empathy. But I honestly feel like it's a disability, and like legally bipolar disorder is a disability, but specifically the empathy is like such a disability. I like couldn't get through books because I was just crying so much. Like one news story would just like break me down, destroy my day. I couldn't go into certain museums. Like there were just so many things where like I couldn't go through life because I was like constantly like emergency mode. And even in college, like I felt like it was unethical to fully focus on my classes because of my YouTube channel. I would read and respond to so many messages from my subscribers back when I was in college. And so many people who were coming for me wanted to end their life. Their parents were going through a divorce. They had an eating disorder. They had depression. Before I even knew I had bipolar, I was helping people through like mental health things. And because of my empathy, I was constantly like, this person is going to end their life if I don't respond, which literally like people would tell me like, because you responded to my message, I chose not to end my life. Like this was a regular thing I experienced since like high school. And so I always felt like I have to help people, like emergency. And I think that it's really hard for like any YouTuber just because you have so many people messaging you and there's only one of you. And so you kind of have to accept that a lot of people are gonna fall through the cracks and you can't get back to them. But like before I was on bipolar medication, my empathy, it was just making it even worse than it would be for another YouTuber, because I just felt like, you know, what if I don't get to them fast enough? So it really made it difficult for me to like fully focus on my classes and just like, yeah, fully apply myself in college, which I think is honestly really sad. Like it's beautiful, but it's sad as well. I feel like I missed out on this beautiful intellectualism and I just could have put like way more hours into school. Okay, so number 6, this is kind of what I was hinting at when I was talking about like the loss of empathy thing. So I forgot life skills because of the memory loss, but more so like the brain damage in depression from my depression episode in 2015, 2016. So no one talks about this. Like when I make videos about it, everyone's like, me too, me too, me too. So I know everyone goes through it, but like professionals never talk about this. When I'm reading articles and research on depression, no one talks about this. But the way I would describe it is like after like a car accident or a major surgery, some people have to do like physical therapy to relearn how to walk, how to eat, how to use their muscles. You know what I mean? Like after certain accidents and certain surgeries and stuff like that, like you have to relearn how to use your muscles. So depression is the exact same thing, except with like a ton of mental skills. So I'll give you some examples. And when I tell people about this in my life who don't have a mental illness, they can't, it's really hard for them to understand and believe it. Of course, they know I'm telling the truth and stuff, but it's like, they're like, what? It makes no sense. Like, how could that happen to someone? So some things that I like lost my skills in, number 1, reading. Like I would read books, like philosophy books, religion stuff, in 2016, so like months and months and months after I was out of my depression episode, I would try to read a book and I couldn't understand it. Like I literally would like read slowly, reread lines, and my brain could not comprehend the information. Like a book that should have been so easy, like something I read in college, I couldn't understand and process it. And another thing that I experienced was like intellectual discussions, and nothing like too high caliber, you know, just like a general like philosophy or theology discussion I'd have with my parents. Like I could not participate, I couldn't process. And I actually remember like the first time I was able to have an intellectual conversation, I was with my dad. And I remember this was like, I think in like, I don't know, sometime in like the winter. So like maybe like 6, 7, 8 months after I was on medication and out of depression. Like I remember the first time I was able to have like, you know, an engaging like philosophical disagreement type thing. And like, I remember being so happy because it's like I had like my core of my identity back, but it took so long. Another thing super weird is singing. I cannot sing. I did choir from when I was like 5 to like 13, so years of choir. I also grew up in a church that sang a cappella, so like everyone at my churches growing up could read music, could sing harmonies, like we could just sing really, really well because we did a cappella singing and we would just sing so long in our worship service. We would sing at Bible camp, sing at potlucks. We were just always singing. So like I don't have a strong voice, but I think everyone can be trained to like read music and like sing in key. So I was able to do that. And I also played viola growing up. So I can read like all the clefs and stuff. I could also like cello and violin, like not well, but like because they're like similar instruments, I could read their clefs and stuff. Like I learned all of them. And if I was at church and we were singing a new song, I didn't even have to look at the music. I could just like, I wouldn't sing the first verse and chorus. I would just listen. And then the second verse and chorus, I could just like sing the lyrics and my brain like knew the melody. Like just by listening, I could get it because I did music so much. And yeah, so music. And it's just like, it's so random. But now at Mass, I could literally be reading the music. Or it can be like the way we sing the song Tous, or like the way we sing the Our Father, stuff like that. Like melodies that I hear every single Mass for months and months and months. I cannot sing. Like I just can't sing. I lost my singing skills from all of growing up. Like I sing quietly because I think it is important to like participate in the church, but a lot of times I just don't sing because I'm like, I cannot sing. I lost my skills of singing. And the thing is, like, I could gain all of these things back. Like if I took singing lessons for a couple of years, I could probably get back to where I was, but the brain damage from that, it's just gone. Other things, cooking, which is so random, but it's like I forgot how to like cut garlic and like how to bake and boil things. Like, because in depression, you're doing autopilot. And so suddenly, like when you're out of depression, autopilot ends and suddenly you start having to do things for yourself, and like basic cooking techniques, like I didn't get. Another thing is makeup. I feel like my makeup skills like super declined and still are not at all what they were before I had depression. And then YouTube, like filming. I remember the first like creative type video I filmed, so one that has like a ton of different shots. I remember the first one I did after I got out of depression, it was like how to pull an all-nighter, but it wasn't just for studying. It wasn't just like pulling an all-nighter and cramming. It was about my whole process of like why I love school and how to study and love studying and be passionate and to focus and stuff. So I remember that video I was filming, and like I did film, like studied film at an art school in high school. So like knowing different filming angles and like what looks good is like super intuitive to me because I'd been doing this for like almost a decade. So I remember going to film and I was like so so confused. Like I was like, what looks good? What angle can I use? Like it probably took me like 3 to 4 times longer than it would have, because I was like confused and I was like trying all these different things to see like what looked the best. And the weirdest thing for me is that like video editing, I don't remember it being as much of an issue. Maybe it was and I just forget. But I remember specifically like filming angles was hard. But maybe since video editing is just like such a huge part of my life, even like, yeah, I don't know. For some reason, video editing wasn't a problem. Maybe because I do it so much, but definitely filming is weird. So yeah, with a lot of these things like cooking, reading, filming, you know, I intentionally spent time reteaching myself these skills, but like it took a long time and a ton of effort and months, especially for intellectual skills. So, and that's like the worst thing that I wish someone had told me, like a professional therapist or psychiatrist. But my whole thing and what like really kept me holding on the whole time I was in depression, it was a very logical thing for me, because I'm like, they have like several dozen different types of antidepressants. So I was like, eventually I was trying out like a lot of medications, and we were like trying to get me on 3 of them and seeing how they work together and stuff. And so I was like, eventually, you know, there's like hundreds of options of like dosages and like cocktails and medicines and stuff. So I was like, eventually we're gonna get on a medication. It will get me out of depression. And I thought once I got out of depression, all of the horror would end. I thought that would be it and I could get back to normal. But it was not as bad as depression, of course. But it was like a whole new type of horror, because I was like, suddenly I like don't know how to be myself. I don't know how to be my personality. I don't know how to do work. I don't know how to have conversations intellectually. I don't know how to read. Like all of these basic things, it's like I could not be myself. I didn't know how to be myself. I didn't remember how to journal, which I did like constantly all throughout college, and all gone. So that's horrible. And then also just like all the trauma emotions coming back and finally processing it. It was like out of the frying pan into the fire, although I would swap them because depression is worse. But literally it was like a whole new horrible thing. Writing is another one. I did a lot of creative writing growing up, and I just do a ton of creative writing, poetry and stuff. And I lost that too, but I will say, and I do not at all think mania is a good thing. I think it's horrible. I wish I had never been in a manic episode. But when I was manic, like got from hypomanic to manic episode, I had writing in that state, like a type of poetry, a type of writing that I never had before. And so that mania kind of like retaught me how to write, which is very interesting, and it like permanently has changed my writing style from the manic stuff. So that is one interesting part of mania, but of course I wish I'd never experienced that. So those were some of the things that I experienced with how depression made me a lot weaker. One other thing I want to share, which I know is extremely controversial. So my intelligence massively decreased. I know that that's extremely controversial, and I would never make a blanket statement like everyone with mental illness has decreased intelligence. But my experience, and I actually was reading a book about neuroscience after my diagnosis and medication and everything, and it was just like defining what intelligence is. And parts of intelligence are processing speed and memory. And so literally like the brain damage from depression, it decreased processing speed and memory and things that are needed, just like basics of what intelligence is. And so I lost that in depression, and actually I wish psychiatrists knew things and communicated, because I read recently last like October that after after a depression episode, this is specifically for people with bipolar, if after depression you stay out of an episode for 1 year, your brain will completely heal and restore itself and grow back. So I wish I'd known that. I totally would have stayed on my meds if I'd been told, listen, all the brain damage that you have incurred will completely heal and restore if you stay out of a manic, hypomanic, or depression or mixed episode for a year. So I didn't know that, so I went off meds, which I do not blame myself for, because bipolar people are constantly going off meds. Mania is an addiction. Psychiatrists and therapists never explain to you why to be on meds. So I don't feel like regret, really. I mean, obviously I don't like what happened, but I don't blame myself is what I'm saying. So basically, like, because I went off meds pretty much a month after I was out of depression unbalanced on meds, I went off meds, and then I was hypomanic, went back on manic. Like, in the year after, I had several manic episodes. And so because of that, I have permanent brain damage, which has decreased my intelligence. Okay, so another thing where depression really weakened me is with memory loss. This is a huge factor in bipolar disorder, major depressive disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, a lot of mental illnesses. This is part of it. And again, this is something that professionals never talk to us about. But throughout our entire lives, for people with bipolar, after the onset of our first episode, memory loss will be constant. And the memory loss occurs in depression because the hippocampus, which is like in the bottom back of your brain, it converts short-term memory into long-term memory, and it physically shrinks in depression. So because of that, the whole time you're in depression, the part of the brain permanently like causing long-term memories to exist is not functioning well. So all the time in depression, like I definitely remember some things, but in general, I have like a ton of memory loss. Like I just have like blank. Like when I'm thinking back in my time in college, like my freshman, sophomore year, so many memories. First part of my junior year, so many memories. And then the rest of college, like when I think back, a lot of it is just like a blank. And if I look at pictures from then or read journals from then, or if like my friends are like reminiscing on memories, like sometimes like forcing myself to remember it, it does come back. But there are so many times where someone has been talking about something, like showed me a picture, and it's terrifying. I have zero memory of it happening. And yeah, my friends honestly feel offended sometimes, but yeah. So the hippocampus is really damaged. And another part of memory loss is that sleep is a huge way that our brains encode memories long term. So in depression, and I hope that they can do a ton of research in the future and fix things like this, because obviously they can't like cure fully. They can't get rid of your genetics that cause bipolar disorder, but I feel like a lot of this brain damage type stuff, I feel like they should be able to do research and improve some of these things. But in depression, when you are sleeping, so normally your brain is in deep sleep for 2/3 of the night, and in REM sleep, rapid eye movement, for 1/3 of the night. So 2/3 deep sleep, 1/3 REM. In depression, it flips. So you're in deep sleep only 1/3 of the night, and REM 2/3 of the night. So it totally makes sense. Like in depression, I would want to sleep like 16 hours, 17, 15, 17, 18. And it's because like you literally, if you're gonna be well rested, you have to sleep double the time when you're in depression to get enough deep sleep, because it's flipped and you're only, yeah, isn't that like really fascinating how your sleep cycle's just messed up? But most people, you know, like can't sleep for 15 hours. So a lot of people with depression, you might be sleeping for 7-10 hours, but you're not getting like that deep, when we're sleeping in deep sleep, like it's extremely important. And so because you're deprived of that, the memory loss is just going to be a huge factor. And what's very interesting is that I feel like the memory loss is kind of a constant thing in really big manic episodes, and psychiatrists, the research actually does talk about this a lot, where like in manic episodes, it's really common to have like complete memory loss of what happened, which I've experienced. And hypomanic, I actually have not experienced that much memory loss, but long term, it's really affected me. Like I've been on medication 19, 20, 20, almost 4 years fully. In like April, May, it will have been like my 4-year anniversary of staying on meds and never going off meds. So I was always taught basically with bipolar, like if you go on medication, stay on medication, like you're set for life. And I actually have this like continual residual memory loss, even since being on meds. Like I forget things all the time. And I try to like write things down and have a schedule, but then I like forget to look at the schedule. Like it's just like, it makes it very difficult to like be responsible and plan things and do work because of this constant memory loss. And my fiance, my friends, family even get hurt sometimes because they'll mention something like that they told me about and I'll completely forget. And for any other person, forgetting something like that just means like you weren't listening, you don't care. But for me, it's like I literally, my brain is not, it's broken so much in not doing memory. But one of the ways that this affects work, besides being like disorganized in general with output, is I forget my research for videos. So I could spend like 50 hours researching for a theology video, and then I spend like 100 hours editing it. It's like 30-40 minute video. And then like 2 months later, someone can be asking me about it on a live stream, and I don't know. Like I forgot everything that I read and researched and learned. And it's like, it sucks because I feel like live streams are a great time to give like theology tidbits when people are watching and interested. And it's like, I can't do that a lot of the times because I forget like really, really basic foundational things about church history and theology. And so it's horrible. Like I so wish I had a better memory. I would be able to be a better influencer. And so that's just like day to day in my life. And actually, I was off meds for, I don't know if it was a full year. I was like on and off, but about a year in 2016 and 2017. And the reason I went back on meds was because I was reading so much theology and church history when I was like researching into Catholicism and the Orthodox Church at the beginning of 2017. And I was realizing that I was like forgetting so much. And I would like write out so much of my thoughts, like write essays and stuff about what I was learning and stuff, so I could like go back to that. But I would just forget all the details, and I was like, this is not normal. This isn't how I used to be before my bipolar diagnosis and stuff. So I was like, I need to go on meds. Like that was like the motivation for going back on meds, was like forgetting all the theology stuff that I was reading. So it didn't help that much though. It did help a lot, but I feel like now, like with bipolar, your brain like continues to decline for the rest of your life, like regardless of what you do. Even if you're perfect, staying on meds, never go on episodes, it's like progressive brain damage. Schizophrenia is the exact same. So it's just very, very frustrating for my job to not remember things. And a lot of times it's kind of like, what's the point of reading is a thought I have, but it's just really, really important, I think, to spiritual beauty, spiritual treasure. I feel like it's honestly a way to connect with God, and I find a lot of joy in learning things. But long term, it just like, it sucks that I forget so much, and I like write in books and stuff, so like I can look back. But yeah, I forget everything. So that would make it like, I know that there are bipolar people who are like scholars, CEOs, like all have PhDs. And like, I genuinely don't get it. I'm like, how can you do, like seriously, if I was in grad school and you're learning, you're reading textbooks, doing lectures, and then 3 months later you have to take a test. Like, I would forget, like I would not be able to be successful in an academic situation like that. So, and everyone calls me high functioning. Like, I'm high functioning with my memory loss. I mean, maybe that's a false label, and if people actually were inside my head, they'd be like, she's not high functioning. Or we just have a really low standard for high functioning. But anyways, like, I feel like I've done a lot of things right besides going off meds 5 times. Like, in the past 4 years, like, I have been on medication constantly. I work out at least 6 times a week. I eat super healthy. I sleep enough. I drink enough water. Like, you know what I mean? I feel like I'm doing it perfectly when it comes to treating my bipolar. But I still have, like, all of this memory loss and stuff. So that is my video script. Let's see. I have a lot of some other stuff that I wrote, but then that got deleted from the script. So that was my whole video, how depression makes you a lot weaker. And it's just like not helpful when people say things like that. And another thing that's very harmful about it is this idea that like good comes out of evil. And I get where people are coming from. There's a lot of Bible verses where it says like God works everything for good. And so I get where people are getting these ideas from, but I think for a lot of evil in the world, like it's super invalidating to be like good will come out of this. Like these people, it's very toxic theology who are like good comes out of evil. Like, would you tell a survivor of a Holocaust that you think good will come out of that? Would you tell someone who, an abortion surgeon who has killed so many babies, would you say so much good is coming out of killing so many babies? Just think of like the Rwandan genocide, the gulags in the Soviet Union, North Korean gulags. Like, would you tell these people who are like murdered brutally, psychologically tortured, starved to death, seen their family members be murdered, would you tell these people, oh, like, keep holding on, it'll make you stronger, God will bring good out of this? Like, no, that's horrible. That's so invalidating. It's so toxic. And it's not a way to talk to people. It's horrible. It's so, it comes across as wounding and malicious. And so if it's not okay to say to people in these war-like genocide situations, like, I don't understand why it's okay to say to people who are going through other types of trauma. And obviously I'm not comparing a mental illness to genocides, but I want to give like analogous examples of suffering going on that seems meaningless. And the thing is, if God could use the crucifixion, Jesus, God, being murdered, crucified, of course, God didn't, the soul, the person of the Trinity, souls are eternal and stuff. So, of course, Jesus died. But out of that, if eternal salvation, unity with God, comes out of something so horrific, then it's like God's power, he can take evil and bring healing out of it. So I totally get that, and I understand where people are coming from when they're like, pain will make you stronger. Like, I get where that's coming from. And I actually do think it's really beautiful that God can take all of our pain and trauma and he can use that for beauty and healing and good. I understand that. But I never, ever, ever think you should say that to someone going through suffering. I just think it's super, super toxic. It doesn't make people want to interact with God. It doesn't make your friends feel better. And so, no. And, you know, there's a phrase called redemptive suffering in Catholicism, and it's, you know, similar to what I was saying, where like out of the crucifixion came eternal salvation. And so God he can heal us. And I totally agree with that. But it's just completely missing the mark by telling people going through traumatic situations that good will come out of it. So an example from my life, and I think a lot of people, and this is why it's not good to say that, I think a lot of types of suffering and evil in that person's lifetime, they never see a shred of good that comes out of it. So a lot of people will like live their whole lives, go through all of this trauma, and they never see good coming out of it. And you know what? Maybe generations down the line, God causes someone to convert into Catholicism because of their legacy or something. You know what I mean? Like, yes, decades later, like God has this overarching look into the future. And so, you know, it is true that there can be good eventually, but some people will live their whole life with PTSD and trauma from evil they've experienced, and they will never see anything beneficial coming out of it. And so it's just not good. And I think like when people are hurting, and this goes back to like the emotional validation thing, which I'm also gonna make a live stream or video about, but when someone's hurting from something, they don't want you to fix their problem. They don't want you to make them feel better. People who are going through hard things, they just want to feel understood, like 100%. They just want people to know, they want to know like people are there for them. People are on their side. People will walk with them through the fire they're living through. But people don't want you to fix their problem, and they don't want you to like try to make you feel better. Like a lot of things in life are just horrible. And there's not a way to just like make them feel better. Like it's okay for people to cry and hurt and exist in brokenness. Like it's fine. And what you need to do when someone's going through a situation like that is just like sit next to them in silence. Hug them, hold them, cry with them. Ask them, what can I do for you right now? But trying to fix situations, make people feel better in a lot of situations where there's not gonna be any better for years, no. So, and this is a skill I forgot that I have to remind myself a lot. If someone is hurting from something, if they're ranting to you, if they're complaining, what you have to do is be like, yeah, why do you feel like this? What happened that made you feel like this? You're so right. You know what I mean? Like, these are ways to love people just in general when someone's going through something, when they're annoyed, when they're hurt, when they're mad, when their day wasn't good. Don't be like, oh, it will get better. Like, oh, good will come out of this. Like, you just don't say that to people, especially people in traumatic situations. Okay. I was gonna say something about mania. I might say it later. I don't want to cause anyone to go off meds though, but I have been a little bit manic the past week, and it's kind of like the first time in a long time when I've like craved mania and stuff. So I've been working through that, but I really have gotten my sleep cycle under control. I think that's the most important thing for taking care of bipolar. I'm gonna read through some of your comments. We've been on the live stream for 53 minutes. So now I'm just gonna do Q&A of things that you guys are saying. Okay. Danielle Smith says, hi, thank you for being here. In the moments you are suffering and hear that, it can be the last thing you wanna hear. Google account. Sorry, Amber Alert. Okay. Two people are arguing together. Augustine Speaks says it's total garbage towards what? Google account is talking about Father Ripperger. So actually, so many people have been like, watch Father Ripperger's videos on demons. So I've checked that out, not a fan at all. It's kind of incredible how many people recommend that. And I should probably talk about demon possession at one point, because it's just like so infuriating in my YouTube channel how many people like tell me to get an exorcism. And the thing is, like, there are different levels of demonic possession. So for everyone dealing with temptation, like, there's a demon type element because Satan works through these fallen angels. And so technically, like, everyone is experiencing that. And I totally agree that, like, Satan uses mental illness. Absolutely. And I think, like, one of the things that it's like, it's so bad, like, it's gotta be demonic influence, is like when people have these thoughts and ideations of wanting to end their life. And I've had times when I've had like a hallucination voice in my head, like telling me to end my life, telling me how to end my life. And so stuff like that, like a hallucination voice, it's like, yes, Satan is a part of that. That is demons. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just so evil. Of course, Satan is using this, but that doesn't mean get an exorcism. You know what I mean? Like, everyone has demonic influence in them. That's just how sin and temptation work. But with mental illness, like, you cannot just like deny the medical and scientific basis for it. Like, if I'm having those ideations of wanting to end my life and, you know, hallucination voices and stuff with the ideations, the answer is going on my medication and it will get rid of that. Like, 100%. Medication completely has gotten rid of those ideations, like 100%. Ever since going on medication, I have never had one of those hallucinations at all. Like, it got rid of the ideations of wanting to end my life completely. And so telling people like, oh, if you're experiencing this bipolar symptom, like demonic possession, go to your priest, go to the healing apostasy in your diocese, get an exorcism, like, it's not helpful when it's a medical issue. It's a brain chemistry issue. And it can be 100% solved by treating an illness with medication, a brain disorder. And so, absolutely, like, prayer should be a part of it. And this is something that I think, like, a lot of people get wrong that really, really angers me. Is a lot of people, when they hear about my bipolar disorder, people who don't know me, people in my life are like on board with my treatment plan because they've seen me off meds and on, and clearly the meds work really well. So people who like don't know me very well, but like hear about my bipolar disorder, they'll be like, have you tried going to the healing apostasy in your diocese? Or like, have you tried to get an exorcism? And it really irritates me, because I've found a way to get rid of my bipolar symptoms being on medication. Like, it's completely solved the problem. Like, of course, the issues I've been talking about in this video with like brain damage and stuff, like, absolutely, I wish they'd create like science stuff where you can take like medications or like go through some kind of treatment to fix the brain damage. And I totally think that in the future, they will be able to do that. Like, I think my children's generation, they're gonna look back on now and like the way I'm treating my bipolar and think it's like so archaic. So absolutely, there are scientists and stuff working on this. And I think a lot of the like side effects, like brain damage, memory loss, all these things, like there's gonna be a medical treatment in the future, 100%. But that doesn't mean like I don't rely on prayer. And I think the worst part about hearing like, have you prayed to get rid of your bipolar? Have you prayed for healing? It's just like, do you not think I pray about the hardest part of my life? Like, do you not think I've ever prayed about my bipolar? Like, I pray about it all the time. And it's just like the audacity to go to someone in extreme suffering and be like, have you tried praying about it? Like, obviously, I pray about it constantly. Like, God is always helping me through the symptoms and the hard parts and the trauma and the crying. Like, God's always there with me. And it's just like unbelievable. Like, I get very offended that people are like, have you tried praying? It's like, obviously, it'd be like going up to someone with cancer cancer or diabetes or heart disease or like, you know, some medical thing and been like, have you tried praying for healing? And in a way that's like, maybe you should, because this is what people mean when they are like, have you prayed for healing? They want me, and I've had people straight up tell me, they want me to get healed by God so that I can go off my medication. People tell me that. And I always love doing analogies and like counterexamples and stuff, because I think it's really helpful to like, and it's philosophy. This is like what we did in college in my analytical philosophy department. But literally, like when I give the analogy of like cancer or heart disease or something, like imagine going up to someone who's battling, you know, stage 3 cancer and being like, have you tried praying for healing? Like obviously every single day, their family and friends are praying for healing. And guess what? God is working through the chemotherapy, through the radiation, through the medical treatment. Like, you know what I mean? Like God's using scientists and doctors. So I'm like, what? When someone's like, have you tried praying for healing so you'll go off medication? Like, would you tell someone with cancer that? Like, hey, have you tried praying for healing? Like maybe you should go off chemotherapy and just pray. Like, would you tell someone that with cancer? No, you'd encourage them to go to treatment. You would be praying for the doctors to have wisdom on the treatments they're giving them. So it's just super weird when people treat mental illness in like a totally different way. And I think one of the worst parts of the pray for healing thing, maybe I should make a whole live stream on this. One of the dumbest parts of that, like literally will cause people to die from ending their life, is that bipolar is cyclical. So like you can go through like a year without having an episode. Like even if someone was off meds, you'll go through times of not having an episode. And so I think someone who was praying for healing by chance or, you know, who knows, intervention, they're no longer in their manic episode or they're no longer in their depression episode. So then they could go a year, 6 months, 2 years without any episode. But the problem is that bipolar people stay on meds throughout their whole life because the meds prevent episodes. So like when I had my like really bad depression episode my junior year of college, it came on gradually, but I have had times when I was kind of like rapid cycling my senior year of college where I would literally be like in a slight depression and then like suddenly spike into mania and then suddenly spike back into like a horrible severe depression. Like in bipolar, randomly you will go into an episode without like a gradual thing. Like yes, you can like, there's a lot of ways to like predict episodes and stuff, like types of dreams is something I've talked about a lot. But like in a lot of cases, you'll just like suddenly be in an episode, and like in that like suddenly in an episode, you can destroy your life. So you can end your life in depression. In mania, you can do a lot of things that like ruin your life. Like a lot of people in mania, they will like sell all their possessions. They'll go tens of thousands of dollars in debt. They'll get angry and quit their job. They will commit adultery on their spouse. Just like really bad things that don't necessarily kill you, but like, you know, they destroy like your career, your family. You sell, like literally common to sell all of your possessions. And it's like in a moment, you can go manic and do that. Like, it's not like, okay, like 3 months in advance, I feel like I'm sort of going manic. I think I'm gonna go back on meds. Like it can just happen. And even if you have like a month in advance where you can feel yourself going manic, it can take like 2 months to get on the right medication. Like the one I'm on that I love prevents depression. I've been on it since 2016, is called Lamictal, also called Lamotrigine. And it takes 2 months to get on the right dosage. Like you have to really gradually taper on, which not all meds take that long. Some take like a week, some take a month, 3 weeks, whatever. Like all of them take a different time to go on. But my point is like, even if, you know, you haven't been in an episode for 2 years and then you go in an episode, even if you had like 3 months in advance. You know, you need to know like 2 or 3 months in advance that you're gonna go into an episode, just because of the medications kicking in. And so I think a lot of people are like, oh, pray for healing so you get out of your episode, but it's like, okay, you're gonna go into another episode at one point. You know, God could heal someone, he could prevent the episodes in the future, but the thing is, like, you don't know 100%. So that's why I really don't think it's good to like pray away episodes. Like, definitely pray about it, but don't go off meds. That's the thing. Like, prayer always needs to go along with science and medicine. And it's like a completely like Protestant invention that anyone is creating the separation between God and science. And I'm gonna make a video in the future, like top 10 Catholic scientists in the Middle Ages, because Catholicism like really developed academia and just created so many amazing scientists in genetics, evolution, astronomy. Like, Catholicism just produced like so many epic scientists that really influenced Western culture. And so it's like, in Catholic history, it's like astounding that there are like Catholics today who have an issue with this, but it's a very like American type Protestant culture thing. So yeah, it shouldn't be surprising, but it's like really weird to me that anyone's saying these things. They just have not thought it through. Jim Ryan says, I have terrible OCD, which is causing me great pain. One of my friends has OCD, and I absolutely think that people with OCD experience way more suffering than people with bipolar disorder. And I think it's interesting that like bipolar and schizophrenia are called like the most severe, like number one most severe, schizophrenia, then bipolar. And I think the only reason is because of the suicide rate and then all of the brain damage and stuff that's going on, and like how the episodes affect your life. Like I was explaining with like, you quit your job, you leave your spouse, you're 30,000 in debt, you sell your possessions, stuff like that. Or like drug addiction and stuff. So I think that is why it's considered so severe. But when it comes to actual like pain, anguish, stress, from what I've read and heard about OCD, I think it's totally worse. So OCD luckily can be treated with antidepressants. It's very interesting that antidepressants don't only help depression, but eating disorders, anxiety. So there are dozens, hundreds of combinations of different medications that can get rid of your OCD symptoms. So it took me like, I mean, I've been on and off meds so much, but it took like 4 months at one point to get on the right dosage. And then it took like 8 months where I was like still having manic symptoms and stuff. And I kept changing my medicine, adding on new ones, changing the dosage. So like it takes so much time. It can to get on the right medication to get rid of your bipolar symptoms, OCD symptoms. So you really have to have like a lot of patience and like keep holding on and keep changing your meds and like don't give up, because you are going to find the perfect medication balance that gets rid of all your symptoms. Like everyone will. And I've heard stories of people who are like no medications worked, and I don't really agree with that, because I think like, have you tried every possible combination? Like seriously, like, because there's so many different dosages of medications, and then there's like so many different combinations. Like I've been on 3 medications for most of my bipolar treatment. So like, don't give up. Keep trying and trying and trying. And it's so weird to me that people will go on like 1 medication, 2, 3, and be like, oh, treatment doesn't work. But like a lot of people with bipolar literally go on 1 medication. They don't like how they feel on it, and then they never go on medication again for years. And I'm like, why did you give up so fast? Don't give up on medication. There's so many options. Google account says, my schizophrenia symptoms of hearing voices causes PTSD and causes OCD over the voices. That's so intense. That's something that bipolar and schizophrenia both have, hallucinations. And it was very interesting for me with like auditory hallucinations in bipolar that I had it in depression, because I always thought that the hallucinations is part of psychosis in mania. But it's actually really common in bipolar to have hallucinations in depression, and a lot of people with just like major depressive disorder also experience hallucinations, but it's very common in schizophrenia and schizoaffective disorder. Kevin Range says, my hallucinations felt like signs from God, so it made me confused. I was actually praying yesterday, and I was telling God how I'm just like very confused still in my relationship with him for that reason. Mine wasn't as intense as yours, where you had hallucinations and you thought like God was directly speaking to you, I think is what you meant. So for me, I just had these like hyper religiosity things where I just felt so close to God, and I was like praying for hours, singing, like dancing, you know what I mean? Like so much emotion, and what I felt was closeness to God. And finding out like, oh, I have a mental illness that causes hyper religiosity, and you know, severe bipolar, not severe, but like more intense mania and like psychosis can cause, like Joseph Smith had bipolar 100%. I've read his journals and life and everything. So Joseph Smith had bipolar, and he like had a hallucination of an angel speaking to him, writes the Book of Mormon. So that's like an extreme example where like he had a visual hallucination of an angel telling him he's God's prophet. So yeah, people have like auditory visual hallucinations of like starting a religion, and it's actually like literally a manic symptom where you want to start your own religion, like super common. So I think it's very confusing. Like once we get out of our episode and we are on medication and we're trying to see like what is our new normal with God, I think for me, it's very confusing and even hard to trust, just because like for so long, I had this experience with God, but like it was caused by mania, hypomania. And so it's like, was that real? Were they fake emotions and hypomania? Like I will never know. I'll never know what's real. And I think because of that, it's really hard like connecting with God and trusting him, because it's like, was that you? Was it not you? So that's very confusing. And I think what's difficult is if someone has like more intense hyper-religiosity, for example, like if they're having, you know, the auditory hallucination or visual hallucination, and they're like starting their own church or like writing religious texts, I think that is like so obviously like not God. But for me, with hypomania religiosity, I was like in the middle. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't I was starting a new religion. It was like I was staying within the Christian religion and just feeling these strong emotions and stuff. And I wasn't being heretical about it. I mean, I was Protestant at the time, but you know what I mean? I wasn't like going, you know, way out there. And so it's because it's in the middle, it's really hard to know, like, was this real? Was this not real? And then like, I'll never know, which is just really, yeah, it's one of the saddest parts. I think about bipolar looking back on my life, like in college and stuff, like what was real? Were these real emotions I felt in relationships? Did I feel these emotions towards people? Was I actually mad at this? Did I actually think this ideology? What did I feel about this class? Like just like every little thing, I'm like, what was real? Was anything real? Will I ever know if it's real? And you'll just never know. So you have to be content from confusion. Google account says, I just got my Latuda in the mail 90 days for more than $6,000. No way. Did you have to pay out of pocket, or is that how much your insurance is paying? The most I've ever been asked to pay for medication is $1,000. And that was after insurance help. That was like my copay. So obviously I was like, not gonna go on that medication. That was, what medication? It's a new one. It starts with like an S or an L. I forget. Memory loss. But in 2017, I was trying to go on some new antipsychotics. And I ended up just going on Seroquel because we tried Vraylar and I don't know, some other one. Probably have it written down somewhere. Google account says insurance is paying the $6,000. Yeah. Yeah, so basically, like, there's a lot of, there's, like, different classes of antipsychotics and mood stabilizers and stuff. So there's ones from, like, a while ago, from the past, where they've been able to create the generic And so basically, like, I always share two names whenever I say a medication. If you've been watching my videos for a while, like, I was just like, Lamictal, also called lamotrigine, because there's one name for the original and one name for the generic. So eventually, like, the scientists will develop the generic of like every medication. And it's honestly evil. But these companies, when they create a new medication, they charge, like Google Count is saying, like $6,000, like $1,000. They charge so much money for the newer medications, and the generic, like, it takes a little bit to develop it, like a few years. And so in the meantime, like, let's say the like older class medications are not working, so your doctor's trying to get you on a newer medication, it can be like extremely expensive. And it's actually pretty cool because your psychiatrist, like my psychiatrist has done that, actually can write your insurance company and like convince them like, hey, my client has tried these medications, like it hasn't really been working. Can you pay for one of the newer medications? So like they can pay, but because there's so many other medications, like it can be hard to convince insurance to try one of the newer medications. And some of like the benefits of the newer medications is that there's less side effects. So they'll do the same but not have side effects. Like the newest ones, that's what they're amazing for. So a lot of people don't like dealing with side effects. And I have personally not experienced many of these, but a lot of people experience weight gain. They experience acne. I got acne from lithium. I'm so bad at remembering things. Lithium. I got horrible acne from my body temperature was raised, super dehydrated, dizzy. When I went on lithium and like every medication, I have so many side effects where I feel really weak, almost passing out, nauseous, like all of these horrible things. But yeah, on lithium, like the acne was very significant. And at the time though, I wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna go off my medication, I don't want acne. Like, and I say this, which is extremely malicious. I'm gonna stop saying this to people, I decided. But in the past, I've said like, well, your depression must not be that bad if you're complaining about acne, and we'll go off of it rather than get rid of your symptoms. Like, I've been so rude and mean and malicious and said that to people. But my experience is like I would choose acne again, literally, if it was the only option for depression. And at the time, like, I was fine with it. Like, having acne at the time, I was like, definitely prefer this to depression, like, love this. So, and honestly, like, I wore a lot of makeup then. I still wear makeup now, but I wore like foundation, concealer, powder on my face every day. And so I have a medication called Trileptal, and it is a like topical basic thing. So what I would do is anytime I got a pimple, I would put Trileptal with a band-aid on. It would get rid of the pimple overnight. So I never had bumps on my face. I just had like red scars, acne scars all over my face. And so, but I would wear foundation over it. So it wasn't that big of a deal because I was able to have like a skincare routine and stuff. But now, I really recommend for acne, it's called Peace Out Acne. And there are these little like stickers that you put on your pimple overnight, and they work exactly like the, no. I said Trileptal, I meant tretinoin. Oh my goodness, people are gonna Google that and be like, why are you talking about a mood stabilizer? Tretinoin cream. Trileptal is a medication I was on in 2017. So, yeah, tretinoin cream. But like back in the day, I was using like tretinoin cream with a band-aid on top. So there's another company called Peace Out Acne that actually are stickers. So it's just way easier to work out. But I actually use tretinoin on my entire face for anti-aging because it has retinol in it. And it's actually like the cheapest retinol, and like health insurance pays for it if you go to a dermatologist and you're like, oh, I use this for acne. So I don't know if I'm going to do that anymore. Maybe that's unethical. I have a ton of tretinoin from the past when I did get acne. So yeah, I've been really good at acne lately. I don't know, like I didn't even realize it, but I randomly had acne, like not as a teenager at all, but like once my bipolar started coming out, even before medications, I would get acne, and I guess I was flying all the time too, so that kind of messed up my skin. But yeah, even up until like 2 years ago, I would still get acne. And like I said, like I would immediately treat it with like Peace Out Acne or tretinoin, and like it would get rid of it. And then like, you know, if you just wear makeup over it, like no one will know. But yeah, lately I haven't really gotten any. I didn't even realize. I was just thinking, I'm like, wow, my skin has cleared up. Okay. Danielle Smith says, being in depression for almost all of RCIA was so hard. Did you remember a lot of it? Was that something you experienced, or you just felt like really, really, really numb towards everything? I had the experience when I was confirmed I was in depression. And so I shared this in my confirmation video, but like I felt nothing when I was confirmed and received the Eucharist and stuff. But it was actually really beautiful because it was like my first time receiving God, and so physically, and I felt nothing emotionally, but it's like I'm physically united with God. So it doesn't matter if I feel anything or not, because like this is real. It's way more real than any emotion I've ever felt about God or from God. So I actually thought it was a really cool, like theological moment, that it was so meaningful and like one of the best days of my life, even though I didn't feel any emotions. So pedagogy. Paris says your dress looks so pretty. Thank you. This actually is a dress. It's so funny. So like people comment on my videos through the years, of course, and a lot of people are like, oh, you're so pretty, love your makeup, your hair is so pretty, love your outfit. Just like typical sweet comments. So sometimes people are like, I love your dress. And of course, in my videos, you only see like from the waist up. So like, you don't know it's a dress. So I'm always so confused, like how good people are at knowing when something is a dress versus a shirt. And a couple times people have completely messed it up, like everyone's wrong, but most of the time people are right. And I'm like, how do you know? Because I'm not someone who wears t-shirts. I barely ever wear t-shirts, even to work out. I just have tank tops. So I don't know, I just don't like t-shirts. But when it comes to like tops, like I wear a lot of like tank top type, flowy type things, you know what I mean? Which can all look like dresses. So I'm like so confused, like how do people always know if it's a dress or not? I don't get it. Danielle Smith said, I had both extremes of being so depressed I couldn't cry to being so depressed I couldn't quit crying. That's very interesting for me. What I experienced is that the only times I cried in depression is because of the way the symptoms were affecting my life. It was not the depression though. So for example, I remember one time I like sat down to write a paper and I like tried to like think of words to say, and I couldn't think. And I started crying because I was just like so exhausted and defeated. But I was crying because of how the symptoms of depression were affecting my life. The actual depression never made me cry. But I am kind of an anomaly, and I've said so many times that like I experience depression. Like I have a masculine brain in a lot of ways, in how I'm like not very emotional, like which is so weird because like I feel like everything about me is a contradiction. Like I have very strong empathy from bipolar, but like I was explaining at the very beginning of the video where like I lost a lot of emotional skills in depression, but like naturally I'm very like concrete, logical, analytical. I'm like a rock, a stump, what people in my life describe me as. So Dennis Gonzalez, oh, thank you so much for the donation with a halo smile emoji. So sweet. So yeah, it's very interesting for me, the whole like emotional thing. So I actually had a therapist once, stupid therapist, who tried to undiagnose me with bipolar. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, she had, this is like, by this time, I think like 3 to 4 different psychiatrists had already like diagnosed me with bipolar. And I'd done like a ton of research and like thought through my whole life. So I was like, at this point, like, I'm not misdiagnosed. Like, I definitely have bipolar. So anyways, she like took out her DSM and like put it in front of me, and she's like, like, you don't have like the sad emotional symptoms of depression. Like, are you sure you had depression? And I'm like, you don't need all the symptoms to get your diagnosis. Like, there's a list and you don't need all of them. Anyways, so yeah, so that was very interesting for me, that I never felt like hopeless or like insecure or sad or broken. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't feel like those emotional depression. And part of it is like bipolar tends to be less emotional depression, although some people do have it. And I honestly wonder if bipolar 1 versus bipolar 2, their depression episodes, I wonder if bipolar 2 depression is more emotional and bipolar 1 depression is more physical. I wonder. But anyways, so that was part of why it was really hard to know that I was in depression and be diagnosed and stuff, because people didn't think I had bipolar. They just thought I had a major depressive episode. And I felt no emotional aspect of it at all. It was just like I was physically exhausted. I could not think. I couldn't make decisions, couldn't think of words to say, couldn't comprehend what I was reading. You know what I mean? Like, I had all these like loss of appetite, losing weight, all of these physical, intellectual symptoms, and not emotional. So because of that, this therapist in 2017 tried to undiagnose me with bipolar. I was like, how are you so stupid? People are so bad at their job though. Like, and I think because, I guess I studied philosophy. My family was very much like, my parents were in the humanities. And so that's where I knew a lot about, from like a, you know, expertise, academia type thing. Growing up, I just like didn't know that much about people in medicine and doctors. And so I think when I first started going to psychiatrists and therapists, I was like, oh, they're a professional. Medicine is very much like analytical. It's a science. Like, even with mental illness, like, it's like certain like criteria you have to fit. Like, it can't be ambiguous. That was my idea at the time. So I was like pretty shocked and very disillusioned and like defeated and just angry at how bad psychiatrists and therapists are at their job. Horrible. And I've literally been to so many, just because like I go off meds, I ditch my treatment plan, I find a new psychiatrist. I didn't like a psychiatrist, which is such a bipolar thing, I think, where you constantly are going from like psychiatrist to psychiatrist, like such a bipolar thing. But I even had one psychiatrist like refuse to treat me. Like, they're like, I can't have you as a patient. Like, I don't want to, I can't help you. And I was literally telling this psychiatrist about like memory loss and brain damage and depression. And the psychiatrist is like, I've never heard of this before. Like, I've never heard of memory loss and brain damage and depression and bipolar. And I was like, this is a huge part of the illness. Like, how do you not know? And he's like, you can't be my patient. I can't do this. And I made a YouTube video about this. I got fired by my psychiatrist. I filmed right after it happened. I was angry because there is like huge waiting lists to get to a psychiatrist. So like going to an appointment and not getting a prescription when I was off meds was like infuriating. Okay. AVJR, I gained weight during my depression episodes. I lost weight over the years, got to get better. Yeah, so it can be either way, which is very interesting. Some people gain weight, some people lose weight. And I think same thing actually with sleep. Some people have insomnia where it's hard to sleep. Other people have hypersomnia where they're sleeping for like 15 hours. But I think it could just be a personality thing. Like, I know, obviously, everyone's an individual. People have aspects of different traits. But I think some people, when they're going through hard times, well, eat because it gives like a dopamine hit and it's comforting. So I think some people, when they're going through hard times, well, overeat or just like eat unhealthy. And other people, when they're going through hard times, limit how much they're eating. And that's how I am. And I've never had a full-blown eating disorder, but I know for me, like my go-to is if I feel like out of control, or if I've hurt someone, or if I'm hurting, like I don't want to eat. It's just like my coping mechanism. And so it makes sense that for me, when I was in depression, like I didn't want to eat, but also it's like a physical thing. Like you lose your appetite. I remember the first time I started feeling hunger signals after my depression episode, I was like so happy because I hadn't experienced hunger signals for like 4 months. And I remember like feeling hungry at different points throughout the day. And I was like, yay, I'm getting myself back. Okay. Paris, girl, you got the fan on? LOL. Yeah, it's really hot. So I have my like standing fan. I don't know what they're called, but this thing, the company is Lasco. I should make an affiliate link. I need to start sharing my affiliate links because you can basically make anything on Amazon an affiliate link. I should just go on my Instagram stories. I should just like take pictures of things in my house and be like, affiliate link. I use this. Okay. Danielle Smith talking about her experience in RCIA and depression. We would go over the gospel reading for the coming Sunday in RCIA, and I would struggle to even read and comprehend it. Totally relate. You know yourself and your intellectual capacity and how you understand things, and then you just cannot process it, and like you can. You know this is like so basic, but you can't do it. Paris says, I lose my appetite when I'm sad. Yeah, I'm the exact same way. I've always been like that. And like, I know when people get eating disorders, I think for a lot of people, it's like a lack of control. And so being able to control how small your body is, it's like it's comforting. It in such a twisted way, like it makes you feel at peace, literally. But I know even like, I think just like not eating when you're sad, I don't think that really has to do with control. I think they're two different things, but like I've experienced both in my life. R says, first time seeing a live of yours. You're so intelligent and fun. God bless Lizzie. Heart, sweet, smiley face. Aww. Paris Cortez, how do you undiagnose someone? So there's actually a problem where a ton of people are misdiagnosed with bipolar, like so many. And this is why psychiatrists and therapists like are very hesitant about diagnosing people with bipolar because of the amount of people who are misdiagnosed. Like it's a problem. But people with actual bipolar, it's like so hard to diagnose them because it takes on average seeing 7 different psychiatrists and therapists before getting the correct bipolar diagnosis. And for me, let's see how many it was for me. I don't know if I remember all of them. So I went to therapist in high school. I went to a therapist freshman year of college, sophomore year of college, when I had depression, next semester when I had depression, psychiatrist, 8. So it took 8. So on average is 7. So for me, it took seeing 8 different psychiatrists and therapists. I might have missed a therapist or psychiatrist, but yeah, it took seeing 8 different professionals. Oh, no. I also went to a psychiatrist in high school. So 9. It took going to 9 different therapists and psychiatrists over the course of 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. So 5 years, seeing 8 different psychiatrists and therapists over the course of 5 years until I got my correct diagnosis. And a lot of people are like, oh, but your manic episode didn't come out until later, so you cannot blame past psychiatrists and therapists for not diagnosing you. Wrong. So number one, I was in a hypomanic episode freshman year of college when I saw a therapist. And actually, I have I think this was my sophomore year. Anyways, I have a vivid memory of this therapist. So they're like, what is your medical history? Like, does anyone in your family have a mental illness? And I'm like, yeah, my aunt has bipolar disorder. And I literally remember, because I think I had researched bipolar at this time, she was like asking me the questions in the DSM to try to like diagnose me. And she was like, no, you don't have bipolar. And what's very annoying is I was literally in a hypomanic episode at the time when she's like, you're not bipolar. And the problem is I wish I could like speak to psychiatrists, like all of them in the country. So the problem is that someone going through a mental illness isn't like a good narrator on what they're experiencing. So I'm not saying they're lying. I'm just saying it's really hard to like know what's going on with you when you're in it. Like for anything, like when you look back, you like better understand what you're going through. So you always should bring like a roommate, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a husband, a wife, a friend, a family member. Like you should always bring someone else into the appointment if you think someone might have a mental illness. I personally think you should bring like more than one person. Bring like 3, 4, 5 different people in your life into the appointment. And I don't know if you would talk to each person individually, but I personally think having like a group conversation with the patient, like 3 to 5 other people and the psychiatrist or therapist, I feel like that would like easily diagnose someone rather than having to, over the course of like 5 years, for me, go to 8 different psychiatrists and therapists. So it just like one of the things they ask is like, do you have racing thoughts? So, I mean, I don't know about other people, but for me, like, I've never really understood what they mean by racing thoughts. Like, I think I've definitely had racing thoughts just because of, like, when I write, like, I'm, like, like, turning the paper, like, trying to fit everything in the margins. Like, so it's like, I must have racing thoughts if I'm writing that much, but it doesn't feel like racing thoughts. Like, I don't know what they mean. It just feels like what you're thinking, you know? It's just like, this is my normal right now. So it's really weird to me that they don't like, it's not like procedural and normal and mandatory that they bring in people in your life. Cause they'll be like, oh, like Lizzie used to act like this. Now she started acting like this. But it's like, yeah, I just feel like I didn't notice a difference in myself. Like like my sophomore year when this therapist was trying to diagnose me, I remember like she was asking like, have you been, you know, more talkative or like in a more lively mood than usual? And I was thinking like, no, this is how I always am. You know what I mean? Like, and it was different. Like it was different than how I'd been in high school. Like when I started college, actually like flying across the country, jet lag sets off episodes, which like explains my entire life in college. Literally like every time I like went on a plane to a different place, my brain flipped into episodes like every time. So, which is like so validating that I know jet lag causes the episodes. It's so validating to be like, wow, at the very beginning of the semester, I thought this. So yeah, it's so weird that like I was literally in a hypomanic episode and a therapist couldn't diagnose me. And I think if there had been a lot of people in my life at the appointment, I honestly think I could have been diagnosed then. So, and the other thing is that a lot of people like move around a lot, or like they go to college or get a new job and they're in a different place. And so I think maybe the psychiatrists think that someone would be going back to the same therapist or the same psychiatrist. But it wasn't like that for me. Like, I was constantly going to different ones, not intentionally, just because of where I lived, or like the counseling center at my school just set me up with a new person. So yeah, I always was going to different ones. So I wish, number one, they brought people in my life, or they should just be like, hey, you might have bipolar disorder. Here's a piece of paper. It has some info on bipolar. If you start experiencing any of these symptoms, you could have bipolar. Please come back. You know what I mean? Like, it's crazy that my sophomore year, she was trying to diagnose me with bipolar because I had some symptoms, obviously. And then I went into a depression episode. Like, if she had been like, hey, I think you could be bipolar, if you ever go into a depression episode, that could be bipolar too. You know what I mean? Like, I wish she just told me rather than me having to piece it together. Like, the bipolar person shouldn't be the one who has to do all the work. But that's how it was for me. So, Alexander, what causes bipolar? Do you know? Bipolarism isn't a word. So bipolar is caused by genetics, and it's also caused by epigenetics. So there have been a lot of like identical twin studies. So if you Google it, you'll come across a lot of different numbers. But the most updated one, and not just updated, but like had the most participants, it was published in 2014. I think it was Denmark. And they followed people over the course of 20 years. They were only studying bipolar type 1. But what they found is 70% of identical twins both had bipolar type 1 disorder. So the reason there's like the 30% people who didn't is because of epigenetics. So it's like they do not understand it very well, but it's throughout your life, your genes and DNA, because of different things you experience, it like permanently changes the way the gene manifests. And so they know 100% it's not caused by like birth trauma when you're giving birth. And it's very interesting because in a lot of the identical twins in the study, they grew up together. Some of them didn't, but the ones who grew up together, for the 30% who didn't both have bipolar, it's really interesting, like what caused one person's epigenetics to turn on bipolar and one to not. So basically, they don't understand it very well at all. So I'm sure like our children's generation, they're gonna look back and be like, they didn't know anything about bipolar. But they think that it's multiple genes. So, and obviously like the genes, the epigenetics affects how it manifests. But they think that in the past, they've thought that like major depressive disorder and bipolar are the same disorder. It's just like bipolar has a little more symptoms. So there is some kind of like genetic overlap with bipolar. So for example, like siblings of someone who's bipolar are more susceptible to having depression episodes without bipolar, and they have like certain traits that are like part of bipolar that aren't necessarily an episode. And so it's kind of like siblings of a bipolar person has one of the bipolar genes. Does that make sense? And I've noticed that people who have depression or anxiety, like people who have a mental illness, tend to be more creative. It's so fascinating because, of course, people with bipolar, because of mania, hypomania, are naturally more creative. Like so many like musicians, like popular singers, have so many have bipolar, mental illness, just more than like the general population, because it makes you more creative. But like I've noticed in my life that people with depression like have more empathy and like are more creative and like I click with them more. So I have actually joked about my fiance that like he has some bipolar genes just because he understands me so well on like a like intense emotional type level. So like we joke that he is like one of the bipolar genes, but he doesn't have like enough to like be bipolar. So yeah, it's several genes and epigenetics. Clearly, because only 70% of identical twins, there's like something in your life that causes it. But yeah, so anyways, in the future, they'll probably be able to figure out exactly what genes cause it, which I don't want, because then people will start aborting babies for being bipolar. 1,000% that will happen, which is horrible. They're already trying to do that with schizophrenia. I read an article where they're like, we're almost at the point where we could start aborting schizophrenic babies. Like, crazy. So right now they're aborting babies with Down syndrome, which is absolutely evil, so horrific. It's just like, we're living in such an evil time where we think that people in society with disabilities don't deserve to live. Seriously, people are like, if you're going to go through suffering or you have a different type of personality that won't click with the world as well, you don't deserve to live. And I think the strangest thing, so like number one, I've actually read a lot of articles on this recently, but the main, like Down syndrome, when it comes to different like genetic conditions, isn't even that severe. And most people, they've done a ton of like surveys and stuff, and most people with Down syndrome are very happy with their life. But because they just can like do the test and know 100% about Down syndrome, whereas with a lot of other illnesses and disabilities and stuff, like you don't have that 100% thing. And so it's just because they have an extra, I think 21st chromosome. So because it's just like a chromosome, they're able to do the test and know 100% in a way that they can't for a lot of other disabilities and like neurodivergent things. So yeah, but the article I was reading was like, it's so weird that Down syndrome is the condition where so many babies are being aborted, because they're like, yes, they will have struggles and pain in life because they're different than everyone else, but they are really, really happy. And I even read an article and it was talking about like they surveyed a ton of families where they have a child with Down syndrome, and actually the families are happier when they have a child with Down syndrome. But just because it's like an imperfection and a disability, people don't want them to live. And in the US, it's 60 to 70% of Down syndrome babies are aborted, which is shocking. In some countries in Europe, some years it's 100%. Like they have 0 babies with Down syndrome who are born. So totally eugenics, absolutely horrific. Some people have been commenting that it's like the Nazis, and it's a very similar ideology because they did kill people with disabilities, specifically because of their disability. So yeah, I find it extremely heartbreaking because I think that I love the word neurodivergent, by the way, because I feel like so many words for mental illnesses are just very negative and have a lot of stigma, and neurodivergent is just such a beautiful word, you know what I mean? Like, just the fact that they came up with like such an empowering, beautiful word to describe mental illness is very sweet. I'm like, wow, whoever came up with that is very creative. But yeah, so the neurodivergent, I think, is a very cool thing. But a lot of people don't realize that a lot of like mental illness type things, like autism is an example, like I've read articles that have said they love when someone with autism is in a workplace on like one of the work teams, because they just have like a different perspective on the world, and it's really helpful for like the work environment. Like they're more creative, they bring more ideas to the table. And I think it's the same thing for like someone with bipolar. Like we have such a strong empathy we've had our whole lives, and so I think that can bring like more passion and urgency into a certain workplace. And not just like with careers and capitalism, those are just like some examples I found where like people literally, like employers are like, I want someone with autism in my workplace, or bipolar, or like generalized anxiety disorder, you know what I mean? Like, even though there's so much pain in a lot of disabilities, there also is like a beautiful perspective in how to see the world. And we live in a hedonistic society. Western world is becoming very hedonistic. So in a lot of ways, we shouldn't be surprised that people are aborting babies with Down syndrome. But like I said, Down syndrome, they're not even unhappy with their lives and going through like immense suffering. Whereas someone with like major depressive disorder or autism, they do go through, in an OCD someone was talking about, they do go through a lot of mental pain throughout their lives. But just the fact that people think just because you're going to live through pain, your life isn't worth living, or you don't have anything to add to the world, I just think is honestly heartbreaking. I just think of when I was going through suffering, and I don't think this is like I want suffering in the world, but I found that I really bonded with my friends when I was going through depression. It made us closer, and they genuinely like felt so loved that like they got to take care of me. Like, it made them flourish. It made us get closer. They felt like they were needed. And so the suffering, of course, I wouldn't wish that on anyone, but like it improved our community. And so I honestly think it's like that with a lot of disabilities and mental illnesses, where it adds something to the world. Suffering isn't just something that we want to completely erase. Like, if someone is going to go through suffering in their life, like, they're going to improve the world with it, honestly. And so it's a very interesting worldview. And one of the articles I was reading about Down syndrome was talking about this. They're like, it seems like we're losing part of humanity in wanting to just erase certain types of suffering. And I honestly think the more we understand about Down syndrome and autism and other mental illnesses, I think, like, I actually have done a lot of research on autism lately, and I watch some like influencers and stuff who talk about it. And it seems like a lot of the suffering they go through is because the world is trying to make them be like everyone else. And I think if they were allowed to be different and not forced to like change to be normal, they would go through a lot less suffering. And so I think there's totally ways for people with disabilities to experience less suffering. You know what I mean? Like, the more we understand how they are and we're more accepting of differences, people will go through less mental trauma and less pain in their lives. And so I think, yes, with certain physical conditions, you like, if you're doing like genetic testing and stuff, you can be like, this person will like objectively go through a ton of physical pain. But with a lot of disabilities, we can change the way we interact with people to cause them to suffer less. You know what I mean? Like, the world can improve and make the world a better place for them. So that's something too that people don't think about. It's like, oh, this person with this mental illness or this mental disability, like, they don't fit into the world. They have suffering because they don't fit into the world. Let's just make them not exist. Like, no, just change the way you're interacting them and make the world more peaceful and hospitable and flourishing for them. You know what I mean? Like, why is the default they shouldn't exist when we can just change the way we interact with them? Like, what? Why are people thinking like this? And this also goes back to why a lot of people choose abortion, because they think if a child grows up in the foster care system or without their biological parents, or their family is more likely to live in poverty, people are like, oh, this child shouldn't exist. Like, their life isn't worth living, which honestly doesn't make sense, because a lot of people, if you're giving up your baby for adoption, you're not putting the baby in the foster care system, you're putting the baby through the private adoption system. So they're not even gonna be in the foster care system. And I'm sure there are situations where the baby is, but like 99% of the time, if someone's choosing to give up their baby for adoption, they go through private adoption, which has a ton of evil in it. I am so much corruption in private adoption. I've been doing a lot of research on it. I'll make videos about it. So I very much think it's like we're selling babies, and they're allowed to make money off of it, which, I mean, makes sense. Like, our country is so capitalist and corrupt. So we have seen a lot of regulations on it. But, yeah. But anyways, my dad was in the foster care system and definitely experienced trauma. And to think, like, his life isn't worth living because he's gone through suffering is just, like, absurd. Like, the suffering he experienced, in a lot of ways, like, it developed him as a person and made him more empathetic, and it, like, completely shaped the way he views religion and politics and philosophy and the way he does his career. Like I said, suffering people experience and disabilities, like, it adds something to the world. And I would say the same thing about my dad. Like, his experience in the foster care system transforms the way he acts towards other people. And so it's like, just wanting to erase suffering, it's just a very interesting thing. And I think, like, hundreds of years from now, if the world, society still exists out of global warming, but I think they're going to look back on how our culture is now, and it's going to be like, they're going to analyze it. They're going to be like, why were they trying to eliminate all suffering? Weird. Literally, I think they're going to be like, what's going on? I think they're also going to be like, why did people do factory farms and eat animals? And they're also going to be like, why was abortion so prevalent? Why were people okay with this? So I think it's going to be interesting hundreds of years from now how we're going to be judged. So I think that's very important when thinking about how we're donating our money, how we're volunteering, how we're voting. Just thinking, like, how are we going to be judged by people who are able to look back? Because right now, like, it is, like I was just saying, where, like, it's hard for someone to be diagnosed with a mental illness when it's, like, just them. And I said that it's because it's hard to, like, see when you're in your own perspective. It's sometimes hard to see, like, you need to step away from it. So I think sometimes we should honestly think about that, like, all the issues we're going through in our country right now, like, how would people see that looking back, big picture? So be on the right side of history is really important. Okay, so we've been live streaming for 115 minutes. So 120 minutes is the 2-hour mark. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. I wrote a script, a video script, to talk about the Ratzinger situation and Pope Benedict. I know that's very disrespectful probably, but I mean, I'm very hurting about it. So I was thinking about talking about that, but I honestly just was experiencing, like, such strong anger that I felt like I just wasn't at a good emotional place to talk about it. And I don't know if I will, but anger can become a very dangerous emotion, and it's really important when you're experiencing strong anger to pray about it and read scripture and feel validated in your anger, and just spend so much time in prayer and reflection and share about it with people in your life. But when you experience strong anger, you shouldn't just be, like, super reactive with it. And I know for me, I just have not been in a good mental place to talk about it, and the internet is permanent, and I have been feeling such intense emotions, and so I think it's been very hard to process it, but kind of a feeling of betrayal is what I've been experiencing. But it has gotten me to want to learn more about the sex abuse crisis in the church, and I really want to listen to the victims, the survivors of it, and their perspective, because I think in the past I just have such a high empathy that I knew I would just, like, be crying so much, which is the appropriate reaction, but to the extent where, like, I couldn't do my life. You know what I mean? It would just be crippling empathy. So I was just very scared of reading a lot of details. I know when the Pennsylvania report came out in 2018, like, several months after I was confirmed, I was a brand new Catholic, and the Pennsylvania report came out, and I made a live stream about it. I posted about it because people were wanting me to be a leader and talk about it and help people process it. And I didn't know how to talk about it because I was brand new to Catholicism. And a lot of people I knew, Catholics I knew, were reading and learning about all the horror that happened which is so important to be informed on evil. That's why we learn so much about the Holocaust and the Soviet Union gulags in North Korea and the Rwandan genocide, like all of these horrible, evil things. It's so important to learn about them so change is made and the same things don't happen again. And so it is good that so many Catholics were immersing themselves in these horrific details. But I always thought I cannot be that person because of my empathy. But I'm at a point now where I have been medicated for so long and my empathy has been decreased. So my conclusion about all of this was the people, the victims, survivors deserve to be heard. And it is interesting because the Larry Nassar sex abuse crisis in gymnastics, I follow a lot of the Olympians and they talk about it a lot. Like Aly Raisman was one of the most vocal in wanting to make change and sharing her story. And I found it like it's good to listen to people who were the victims, the survivors who went through it. Like that is how you make change, listening to their stories. And so I was thinking I want to listen to the survivors, the victims of a Catholic sex abuse crisis. I want to hear their stories. And I think I didn't have that reaction before because I was newly medicated. I remember I went off my meds at the beginning of 2018. Not at the beginning, but I think in like the spring or something. So I was off for a little bit. So now it's like I've been on so long and I have less empathy. So I'm able to read more about evil without it overwhelming me so much. So that's something that came out of all my strong anger about that coming out. So I'm definitely want to learn more about it. And I might make a video about this sex abuse crisis. I've made live streams, videos in the past, so I could make one about it. But I talk to people in my life about it a lot. And I've just done a lot of research on it and like how the church has changed in creating so many policies so that things like this never happen again. Like so much vetting when people become priests, they have to do psychological analysis. And of course, someone will just be immediately fired from the priesthood if that happens, or more so if they're like priming a child. And we have to take a sexual abuse course to volunteer in your church, to teach at a Catholic school, to read scripture, to be a Eucharistic minister, to lead RCIA. Like literally anytime you're volunteering at your Catholic church or at a Catholic school, you have to do this like really long seminar type thing. Virtus is the name in a lot of dioceses. And so now I know that the Catholic Church is one of the safest places for children because of all the changes that happened. And I think a lot of other churches and organizations can learn from the way Catholicism is going right now. There are just so many rules. Like anytime there's an empty classroom, like at a Catholic retreat or school, the classroom is locked. Like you're not allowed to have an empty classroom. And also, if someone is like teaching a kids class, there always have to be 2 adults. And so just so many things in place so it never happens again. But I actually think as parents, every parent should take the Catholic Virtues class because you learn about the signs that someone is going to sexually abuse a child before it happens. Like the majority, almost all the time, there's like things leading up to it happening when they start manipulating the child. And so all this stuff can be prevented. And so we have to retake the class regularly to become recertified in the class. And so I am so grateful that when I have children, I'll be able to know all of these signs for anyone in my life who would consider doing that to a child. And so I'm very proud of the current Catholic Church and how we're just creating such a safe place for children. And I know reading about the history and the horror is so hard for parents and for everyone, but especially parents. And I think it would be really hard to trust if I was in that situation. But as someone who is new to the church and has learned so much done so much research, I am very grateful that I got to take the class and that so many people, like everyone, is just watching out for children in case a situation like that, the priming and manipulation, begins. So I'm very thankful for that, and it was very hard to get through the class. I actually walked out of one because I was crying too much, and I was just like, I cannot do this. So then I went to another class that was more of like a, like we had groups, and we processed and discussed it in small groups. It was in general like a much smaller one. It was the same course material, but just the way we did it, we like had breaks to talk to each other about it, and everyone I'm about to cry. Everyone shared their own experiences of like what they've gone through, or like family members or friends and what they've experienced. So I feel like it was a place where we like people cried and stuff talking about it. So it like gave everyone like a safe place to cry and mourn and share. The first Virtues class I went to was just like a giant line to like sit there and like take notes and stuff. So the second one, I'm very grateful for the format of it, and maybe I'll be a Virtues teacher in the future because I think that's so beautiful and amazing. That so many other live streams planned out and videos. I have my video almost finished. It is called, I think it's 10 or 13, maybe 10, doing 13, but it's like 10 signs. Yeah. So I was just talking about like in general my life and like things to look out for that could help other people. Can find next video. I'm also starting a monthly email newsletter, so if you go to my website LizziesAnswers.com, it's going to be a pop-up on the website. It should be on every single blog post and webpage and everything, so you can sign up for my email list. So really excited about that. One of my family members does an email subscription thing, so I was like, oh my goodness, I need to create an email list too. It's just a really fun way to connect, because I feel like social media, like you share small moments, like what you're going through, like this just happened, but creating a newsletter is like a big picture to just like share some writing about what's going on. Okay. I love you guys so much. I hope you have a good night, and I hope you have a wonderful Mass on Sunday. Love being Catholic. So happy so many of you are Catholic too, or considering converting into the church, researching in. You guys are the real heroes for having so much courage and passion and just desire for knowledge and truth.